Hey everyone. Today, back by popular demand, the Widowmaker project. The big thing we're going to be talking about today, so you can see the engine's hanging right now, so we're going to be talking about the production intent motor mount and how you can buy that and whatnot. We're also going to be talking about the flywheel and the clutch selection. There's a minor modification left to mount the trans, and we're probably going to get a little bit into exhaust, and then the last thing is we're going to talk about heat shields because I think it's going to be necessary in this application, and we're going to discuss the difference and merits between the Toyota approach and the Lotus approach. So stay tuned for all that. Let's get to it. Widowmaker number 6. So check this out, guys. Right here, I've got the production intent for the 2GR motor mount for the Spyder. Super happy with this piece. It was a little complicated over here to get all the coolant manifold and everything to fit through, but the only thing this is not quite like production is right here. There's a logo missing. That's going to be added for the production units. Now, this thing right here is on pre-sale. There's a link in the description. And I don't normally do pre-sales, but because I have no idea at all what the interest is on this thing, if it's 2, 20, or 200 units. And I want to make sure that I have enough parts of these supporting parts. So by putting this up on pre-sale, it means that if I have other parts that are missing, I can get those ordered and get those orders delivered quicker. So either way, if you're interested, if you pre-buy, that would be wonderful. Certainly don't have to. The other quick note is audio right here is corrected. I've got a second audio recorder on the way also, so that I won't have this issue again. I didn't like the audio that I had to put on the last video. So yeah, with that out of the way, I guess it's time to talk about clutch and flywheel. So let's get over to the motor and do that. If you've never done a clutch job on a car before, the choices can be a bit overwhelming. So let's talk about it a little bit. These are generally the three kind of choices you have. You've got the OEM, you've got the lightweight steel, and the lightweight aluminum. So technically there is no OEM flywheel for the 2GR, and that even includes the Lotus one, because the Lotus one is a dual mass unit that's extra thick and extra heavy. It's a lot more comparable to a diesel flywheel, and nobody wants a dual mass flywheel. You just don't. But if you want one of these for the 2GR, the 1MZ and the 3VZ share the exact same bolt pattern, the same size, tooth count, and everything. So you can just get one of those, either new from Toyota still, or occasionally they'll pop up on eBay or your favorite junkyard. The next choice is the only choice that's currently available for the 2GR aftermarket. It's an aluminum unit. Dimensionally, it's almost identical to the OEM, except it's aluminum, and where it matters, it's steel, and then the ring gear, of course, is steel also. This is lighter weight, so your motor picks up and drops revs a lot quicker. Some people, especially beginners, do find this a bit tricky to drive. Frankly, it makes rev matching a little bit of fun. With something like this, it's just a lot harder to rev match because things go too slow, so you just don't end up doing it. With this, you kind of can. And the next choice is this. So this is a full steel unit, and it's nice because it's lightweight, so it's a very similar weight to this. This one's just a couple ounces lighter, but as you can see, there's very little weight on the outside of the perimeter. So this one, as far as the rotational inertia goes, is even less than that. What I really like about these is there's more metal here to actually dissipate the heat into. This is just a thin, I think it's probably 3 millimeters. So it's pretty easy to overwhelm this with heat, with significant abuse. Granted, it was abusive. I have warped these plates, but this is just a lot harder to warp. So I like these, but currently there's no offering on the market for one of these that's made to fit the 2GR. I've considered actually doing that over the years. If there's enough demand for it, give me a heads up and we can talk about it. It wouldn't take that many people getting together for me to be able to make one of those. So for this swap then, we're going to be going here. Now, something I wanted to mention, This flywheel here, this is from ACT, is listed on their site as being 1MZ and 3VZ compatible, which in theory, that means it actually fits a 2GR because everything about this application matches a 2GR. But if we put them back to back here, you can see the bolt pattern does not line up. And you can see it just visually also, you know. Those bolt holes are a lot bigger and they're a lot further in than these ones. So the 1MZ, 3VZ application is actually a misprint on this. I've tried to get ACT to correct it. I've gotten responses back, but nobody's ever corrected the website, so not sure what to say there. They probably just don't believe me that it's actually wrong. Then the next part of your decision is your clutch disc material. So I only have 2 examples here. That is an OEM organic, and this is an aftermarket ceramic. Now again, this one has a little bit less weight on the outside, so it does help rev up quicker, but that's not the main purpose. These ceramic pucks here, they're very durable. They will put up to a lot more heat, and generally I just find these all around better. Now, they're trickier to engage. They've got a much shallower depth of engagement, so it just takes a little bit of getting used to drive, but I really enjoy these. These ones, the problem is if you get them too hot, they glaze over. Once they glaze over, you're usually done. Now, if you can drive gently for a couple thousands of miles, you can sometimes get the glazing to come off. But this, just never going to happen. So, especially for racetrack use, you want this, but I put something like this in all of my street cars also. Which brings us then to the pressure plate. There are choices here again. The choices are not nearly as obvious. So these are actually 2 different ones. Honestly, they look identical. I wouldn't even be surprised if this is actually a remanufactured factory unit, and the only thing that they've changed is this diaphragm spring. It's significantly thicker. So, and you can see it's got these reinforcements in here, whereas this does not. Honestly, I hadn't noticed until now just how similar those 2 are. I really, man. Yeah. There's no way that's not just the only part that's different here is the paint job and the spring. But that's fine. That's the only difference we care about. We want a little bit more clamping pressure. And the last thing to consider about clutches is they need to be rated in foot-pounds of torque. Horsepower is not actually that critical. Now, you know, generally horsepower and torque do go together, but especially when you're pushing different applications, right? So in this case, we've got a completely different motor. This is a Scion TC unit. That's definitely not a Scion TC motor. So the torque curve characteristics are completely different. And what matters to the clutch is the amount of torque. Now, in theory, yes, some clutch designs, the higher RPM you get them, some of them it weakens the spring, some of them it strengthens the springs depending on the operating RPM, but that's a pretty minimal effect. So really, your clutch needs to be rated in torque. And for the 2GR, unless you're making it a little spicier, you really want to aim for something that's got about 350 foot-pounds of torque or higher. And then just a last note, hardware. So like this, which is a motor that started with an automatic, often the fasteners for the automatic won't be long enough. And you can see, right, this is what's coming out, that's what's going in. The worst part is this will usually engage by a couple threads, so some people use them, and then their flywheel comes apart. It's a big disaster. The part numbers for these are going to be in the description, and there's going to be links down there. So if you click on the links, I actually get a couple dollars if you buy it through there. So I certainly appreciate it. But even if you just want the part number, just go down there. And then also, just for the pressure plate, this is excessive, but why not? I'm going to be using ARP fasteners also for the pressure plate. Another quick thing to consider is your throwout bearing. You know, the thing is, back in the day, it used to be that you just wanted to replace your throwout bearing every time. Throwout bearings these days are a lot more expensive because they include the hydraulics. You really want to kind of take into consideration, right? If it's a car that's got 150,000 miles and you're going to be wanting to replace the clutch and put another 150,000 miles on it, then by all means, yeah, put a new throwout bearing, because even if it hasn't failed, it probably will fail before you get to the end of that service life. If it's something that you're abusing on the track and you've got 20,000 miles and you need a new clutch, well, I mean, take a look at it. You know, some things you want to inspect. This bearing here, if it spins too freely, then that means there's no grease left in here. Now this one, you know, honestly, it's marginal. It probably has grease left in here. Maybe, maybe not. I'm going to go ahead and replace it with a new one, but I'm going to hang on to the other one because I think in a pinch, I would happily throw this in the car. I'll just put a cap on there, make sure that dust can't get in there, and save it on the shelf. All right, let's get to it. This does not get used. And before we install the transmission, let's talk about how we're going to attach it. So we're going to need two M10s by 30 millimeters. These go down here in these two holes. Then we're going to need two M12s by 70 millimeters. And that goes here and here. Now you'll notice this one sticks out a lot. It doesn't matter on this engine. That hole is open bottom, but you can actually get away with a, with a 60 or 65 or 70. Since there was another 70 there, I just picked a 70 down here. M12 by 55. And then the other M12 by 55 goes here, but it doesn't fit yet. It fits on this side. The hole is a little bit tapered. So we're going to take a 1/2 inch drill bit. We're going to run it down this hole to expand it a little bit, and then we're going to install it. And now, M12 by 55 fits. All right, let's install it. To provide early alignment, I'm going to put this bolt right here and just run it all the way through. That bolt's a size smaller, but that's just fine. And then we can align the hole. And now we can just take our time, rock this up, get everything aligned. Get the spline to Of course, the spline doesn't want to go in. There it goes. There we go. Next, we put the motor mount on. And it actually will not come with any hardware because it reuses all of the factory hardware. And the reason for that is these 115 millimeter bolts are quite expensive. So I can save money on the mount, make it a little cheaper for you guys by not including ones and, you know, not making it so it's a different size. All right, next thing we want to do is tackle the exhaust. So the reason we're doing this is I want to minimize the number of times this engine has to come in and out of the chassis. So right now it's ready to go in, but we might as well test a new exhaust at the same time. So I've got the exhaust ports plugged so that grit doesn't get back in there. And what I'm thinking we're going to do, so there's the coolant outlet is about here. So we've got all this space to work with, and this is just barely touching the firewall. So we need to go in a little bit. And my thought is I'm just going to kind of hack this off and then kind of keep that bend there and kind of aim somewhere around here. So I'm not going to continue it any further than that because once we're past this area, we're pretty much in the clear at that point. So yeah, let's just give that a go. All right, obviously that's not finished, but that gives us kind of our general shape in this area. And if that fits, then we'll come in and we'll kind of patch those holes, close it all up. I gotta kind of make this area back here flow a little bit better. Yeah, this, obviously not a high performance header, but it should be fine. And now let's install it and see where everything lands. So let's take you underneath the car. I got as much light under here as I can, but where we put that exhaust, okay, so that's not gonna work, but we can see it is actually just barely touching the firewall now. I did measure it. It doesn't appear that it's deforming it, so that really is our limit right there. Which is good. That's really good to know. We can then use that to mock something up. Another thing worth noting is where the coolant is. See, it's pointing directly at the oil cooler. That's good to know for the future. The other concern is, do you see this right here that I'm touching? That's the fuel line. So Yeah, the exhaust is definitely going to have to, the whole thing's going to have to move over that way. So we're not going to be able to use this piece, but this is good. This is really good learning stuff. Other than that, yeah, let's this bolt, and the reason you can see that there's no pressure, see how that moves easily? That's because the exhaust is essentially just barely resting on the firewall right at that spot. So yeah, it's not great news, but it's not bad news. So let's get out of here and talk about it. Well, we learned a couple things today. First is the motor mount fits great. Off camera, I also put in the cross member, and the rear motor mount bolt just slides right in. So everything is aligned perfectly. I'm super thrilled. The other thing is the exhaust. So on the surface, you could say that that's not going to work, but there's a couple things to note there. So first is the area that it's touching is an area of the firewall that's pushed back about 15 millimeters or so. So if we were to just make the firewall flat, then we'd have 15 millimeters of clearance there, which is more than enough in that area given how the motor moves. And we'll have to talk about heat shielding, which we'll get to in a second. But then the only thing I really don't like about it is how close it is to the fuel line. It might just be a question of putting a couple more bends in there and snaking around there. I don't know. I'll have to spend some time kind of scratching my head on that one. But worst case scenario, we do have kind of an external maximum shape envelope that it would fit in. And that's also super useful to have. So honestly, my hope at this point is that a whole pile of you guys go pre-order. So I know that a whole bunch of you guys are interested, and not just interested in saying you're interested, but interested in the way that you're putting money in the way that you're saying you're interested. And if that's the case, then I can just design a nice little cast piece that's a nice little kind of a block hugger shorty. I can make it thin wall cast stainless, so it's not even going to be super heavy. And the stainless means that the heat moves really poorly through stainless, so then it doesn't send a whole bunch of heat into the cabin. Anyways, I honestly have no idea how many people are going to buy parts, so I don't want to spend a ton of money on that until I have a better idea. But yeah, no, I honestly hope that there's enough of you guys interested in all this stuff that I can make it all production, and we can all enjoy this thing. So I want to talk about heat shields also. So when Toyota has a really hot area, they do something like this. So this is the catalytic converter. It's really the hottest part in the car. Also on the inside, it's just kind of free floating. I'll have to investigate, but I'm pretty sure this is just fiberglass. Maybe. I don't know. I'll have to investigate a little bit, but I'm pretty sure it's just fiberglass. So this does a really good job of keeping heat out. You can see kind of by the color out here, this only got to, several hundred degrees on the outside, and that's, 4 millimeters away from something that was well over 1,000 degrees. In lower heat areas, they do something like this. So this is a stock shield off of the Spyder for the exhaust. And looking at stuff like this, this stuff is really expensive to replicate, and you look at it and go, well, that's inconvenient, because they got all this ribbing in here, and that ribbing adds strength to something that's otherwise quite flimsy. But if you take a little bit of inspiration and you go look at Lotus, what they do for their heat shields is they do a lot of this. Now, this particular one is aluminum, but they also do the same thing in stainless. And the nice thing about this is it's nice and thin, but it's got structural rigidity because of all the embossing. And conveniently, check this out. So this stuff, it's available. So this stuff is aluminum for the areas that don't need a lot of heat shielding. And then it's also available in stainless steel, which, it's really flimsy now, but you put a couple bends in it and this will be more than strong enough. And again, heat transfers really slowly through stainless steel, plus the energy can't radiate through it. So honestly, we could have the exhaust running 15 millimeters away from the firewall, have this about 5 millimeters away from the exhaust, and the firewall would just basically get a little hot to the touch, maybe. And with the carpet on top, you'll never be able to touch it, so it'll be great. Depending on how much clearance we have, we might have to explore exactly what this material is. And for that matter, that might just be so it doesn't rattle, you know? I don't know. I'll have to run some tests. But you know what? That's a pretty easy test to run. Yeah, it's an acetylene torch and a short setup away from figuring out exactly what needs to happen here. Yeah, so I think that's it for this video. Next on here is going to be... You know what? Next on here is going to depend on how many people pre-buy that mount, because that's going to determine if I go to making more production pieces or making more, you know, one-off pieces and just showing you guys how I do it. So I'm not going to speak to that too much. Next video, I hope to get a drive video out for the 1AR that I just put camshafts in. And I will get that on the dyno within 2 weeks. So yeah, and it's pretty exciting. We're getting awfully close to 4,000 subscribers. That's so cool. I'm excited by that. So thank you to everybody that's subscribed. And yeah, have a good evening. We'll see you guys later.